My Lords, it's a privilege to speak after the Right Reverend Prelate and to hear of the encouraging things that are happening in his diocese, but also to hear him mention the fact that they have a cost. I think he is possibly the first speaker in this debate who has drawn attention to cost. I shall spend quite a lot of my time talking exactly about that. This is a technical bill, but it has a simple purpose, and the purpose is to give effect to the British energy security policy. And that means, in my view, ensuring that energy is available abundantly and affordably to the British people and to British industry and businesses, and that energy is also, as far as is possible, secure against external shocks. That is how we maintain and enhance our prosperity. And any other statement of the government's objective, in my view, would appear to me to be traducing the obligations we have to the nation. Net zero is not an energy strategy. Net zero is a constraint on how we might achieve our energy strategy. Nobody seriously thinks that the UK's commitment to net zero, to achieve net zero by 2050, is going to have any significant effect on the heating of the planet, since we only produce 1% of global emissions. It is, at best, an example, setting an example to the world, but its practical effect will be very small indeed. So the core strategy for this government has to remain abundant and affordable energy for the UK. And if my noble friend on the front bench disagrees about that, I'm sure he will say so when he winds up. So the question is how this bill and the energy strategy that it effectuates measure up to that objective. Now, it's a mixed bag, and like other speakers, I'm going, in the interests of time, to be fairly selective about the parts of the bill I choose to focus on at this stage. One of the things the bill does is to encourage investment in wind power. Despite claims that the cost of wind power is constantly falling, that is simply not true. Though it has fallen from its early days, it is ceasing to fall. The fall is declining as a result of the maturity of the industry, as indeed as you'd expect with any industry that matures. But even if it's the case that the marginal cost of wind power can be brought down to something close to zero, in other words, that it is similar to nuclear power in that regard, nonetheless, the capital costs required and taken when they are taken into account would still require subsidies in addition to the feed-in tariff, and these are truly very large indeed when it comes to offshore wind. Moreover, despite providing in excess of 20% of our energy, there are many days when wind power falls close to zero, and much the same can be said of solar. And this means that gas generation has to be available to take up the slack at those times. I heard the noble Baroness, Lady Sheehan, envisage a day when demand for gas would be zero. I do not understand what source of power it is she imagines will be taking up the slack when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. But to make
I do challenge the noble lord to say where I said that the need for gas will be zero. I said it would be minuscule.
I'm more than happy to accept, because it doesn't change my argument in the slightest, the correction from zero to minuscule. I thought I'd said close to zero, but whichever, I'm more than happy to accept the word minuscule. But it remains the case, I was hoping when the noble Baroness stood up, that she would be telling me what fuel it was that was going to be taking up the slack in the place of gas. but to make demand for gas intermittent, to match the intermittency of wind power, in the words of Sir Dieter Helm, quote, is devastating to the economics of gas generation. And that for two reasons. The first is it means it takes a much longer time to recover the capital costs. And the second is that because the gas power is demanded only intermittently, the cost of producing that supply increases as well. So in addition to the high cost of wind generation, we have to take account of an inevitable increase in the cost of electricity generated by gas, simply to match it and to make up for the intermittency. Now, Professor Helm is a great supporter and advocate of net zero. His complaint is that we are not being honest with the British public about the costs of it. My noble friend, the Minister, will be able to say, when he stands up, whether he thinks the government is being honest with the British public and that Professor Helm has got it wrong. So net zero is not cheap, and the government needs to level with the public. They need to show that their energy strategy is affordable. Then we come to the question of abundance. The noble Baroness Lady Blake referred to, as other speakers have, referred to Russia's illegal war in Ukraine. My worry was that she hadn't taken account of how radically that has changed our situation. My worry on that score rather fell away when I heard my noble friend Lord Howell of Guildford, because he explained very clearly that this is not some minor event. This is a radical change in the energy supply market, and goes to the question of whether we are going to be able to maintain abundant supplies. The noble Baroness Lady Blake called for three things to happen simultaneously as a result of this bill. She wanted to cut bills, to increase security, and to tackle climate change. I hope I've quoted her or referred to her correctly. But my point is that you cannot have all of those three. The second two require higher bills, because the cost of the second two is largely borne by bill payers rather than taxpayers. And even if you take it out of the bills and put it on the taxpayers, of course the taxpayers are the bill payers with a different hat on. Now, there are things in this bill that I agree with, and I was particularly pleased to see the reference to the promotion of nuclear fusion. It may be a very long way off. Nuclear fusion as a solution has always been a long way off, and that makes one a little bit sceptical. But I have confidence that something can be done. Nuclear fusion, of course, is an extremely clean form of energy, not like nuclear fission. And the UK Atomic Energy Authority is a leader in this field. In fact, at the moment, there are half a dozen places throughout the country competing to be the home of the Atomic Energy Authority's spherical tokamak, which is going to take forward Britain's next step in developing the prospect of genuine nuclear fusion. And if anything, I would encourage the government to spend more money, because that, I'm told, would actually speed up their work. So that's all very good. Nuclear fission will be core to providing our base load, and I welcome the work the government has done to promote that as well. But gas will remain absolutely indispensable to our energy mix, large amounts of gas, all the more so the more we rely on wind and solar. And the gaping hole in this bill and in this strategy, not only the hole that was referred to by my noble friend Lord Howell of Guildford, in that we are not sufficiently encouraging increased oil production amongst the oil producers. But as far as our domestic policy is concerned, the gaping hole in the bill is its failure to put increased domestic production of gas at the heart of our energy strategy.